Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to the Charter Awards. We're very proud of the Charter Awards. It's a way to reward those efforts that come closest to fulfilling the ideals of the Charter. And this year we have a very, very distinguished jury that picked projects that I think you'll enjoy hearing more about. But first, I wanted to thank some Charter Awards sponsors who helped to make this dinner affordable to most of you. And they are the Ardent Residential LP, Burry and Partners Incorporated, Heritage Title Company of Austin Incorporated, and Schlosser Development Corporation, all of whom deserve our thanks and support. You should go out and buy services and products from them immediately after the meal. I also want to personally thank the two people on the staff, the CNU, that were involved in this project. Steve Filmanowitz, the communications director, and Peyton Chung, who is our researcher, and they helped the jury in their deliberations. With that, it's now my pleasure to introduce the leader of the jury, the chair of the jury, Andres Duany.
Thank you. This is the short one, Victor. Use that one. I'd like to introduce the chair of next year's jury, Victor Dover of Dover Cole. Some years ago, I believe Steph began the tradition of having the future jury chair attend the prior jury, and it does smooth things out. There's a lot of continuity when that happens, because sometimes it is a very trying, it's a very difficult and exhausting thing to look at 135 projects and have to select them down and to come to agreement. In fact, this jury was an interesting one. I don't know whether the photographs are up. Oh, here it is. If you would have the photograph of the jury, you may notice it's up that with the exception of myself and Victor somewhat, and Steph, who's not there at all because he shot off to do something else, that it's a very young jury. And we did this on purpose. We wanted to see through the eyes of the next generation to see where new urbanism was going. And there you see Peter Park, Ben Bolger, who came from England and who is, I think, one of the real ambassadors of that ever closer relationship between the new urbanism and the Prince of Wales. Many endeavors. Victor Dover, let's see, who is here? Jeff Dyer, and then Karen Paralek, and who is there? Oh, and Catherine Kelly, as well as the two dogs, Alice and Eleanor, who were there disrupting the last day. I have a few things. Excuse me? Peter Park. Oh, and Peter Park. Did I forget to say that? And Peter Park. Anyway, Steph was not present in the photograph, very much present in the jury. A great, good spirit, as always, with tremendous energy. I have a few comments to make, which I'm going to read from the preamble selectively, and then we'll get on to giving the awards. And this year, what we'd like to do is to give the chance for the awardees to make a few words, to make a few comments. Okay, with the exception of Stefanos Polizoides and me, this year's was a young jury, as I said. We are seeing, so look at the awards through the next generation's eyes. The projects were on the whole excellent. There is again a craft of urbanism and a competence. Competence has become habitual. As always, many projects were certainly worthy of an award, but were not validated by the jury. And all of us regret that some projects didn't make it, and some of us cannot remember why. However, some of the ones were not in any way inferior, but we did have the idea, better wait until next year, until it's further along. There's no doubt about that. The more built they are, the more chance they have to become. So submit and resubmit every year as they come along. In general, we try to apply Victor's, what we call the tail wag test, which is the jury try to avoid the sway of projects that only manifest a single idea, however innovative or seductive. You know, sometimes you fall in love with something that has been done, and I remember those projects. But thus, being merely transit-oriented was not enough, as an example. Being green was not enough. Such simplification trivializes the complexity of urbanism. Remember, new urbanism is still about making the entire human community, and this could only be achieved through the hard work of detail. There were no projects forcibly discarded for displaying ignorance. Clearly, the Charter has been thoroughly assimilated into daily practice, and it continues to be comprehensive enough to lead with all situations. And it is also simple enough to be an effective guide in the height of practitioners. In fact, it has become as natural as the language we speak. It's an amazing document. Now, while new urbanist architecture is indeed improving, we noticed a certain weakness manifested in the T3 single-family houses. This is by no means a crisis, but there is a pervasive falling back on the styles, quote unquote, rather than developing a vernacular. Victor Dover called the style of the houses blandiose, quote unquote. Now, simplicity.
I didn't know he was writing that down.
This is all, by the way, this is our collective. I was taking notes. These are notes. The slight incoherence is because I was taking notes after the jury. Those in the jury will recognize this. Blandiose, simplicity is in the right direction, but it is not enough. The search must continue for a truly urban, low-density architecture. Look at the contradiction, a truly urban, low-density architecture. The reviewed projects indicate how omnivorous we have become. We're everywhere, doing every kind of project. They engage in very diverse situations, making the limits of our interventions hard to discern. There's almost nothing that some new urbanist is not engaging. Some projects even assimilated urban patterns outside the canon, suggesting a transformation. Some projects, as they become more environmental, are beginning to skirt, essentially, the look of 1960s suburban PUDs, which is very interesting, and perhaps we should relook at that. Perhaps those projects do something well. I don't know. Now, some comments. After reviewing the submitted projects, the jury noticed a few things, okay? The small but highly defined urban space is underappreciated. These are what Steph Polizoidis calls spatial compression. These spaces must be re-emphasized because wherever found, whether in Paris or Pasadena, they're socially valuable and they're marketable. It's a commodity that costs nothing to produce. Second comment, the Midwest is awake. Finally, there was an enormous number of Midwestern projects, almost a propensity for project. It has finally come alive with projects. Now only New England seems underrepresented. Third, size is not as impressive as great execution. There was a time when we said, what a large project. What a large project. We're really, that used to be important. Now there are many large projects. So size is not as impressive as great execution. Okay, remember that. Small projects, the jury felt, as you will notice, can make a real difference as models. Projects that were, quote unquote, invisibly green, unfortunately, did not receive special consideration for doing so. We looked beyond the intrinsic sustainability of new urbanism for expressive, polemical sustainability. Not gimmicks, but the search for proper expression. I'm not sure whether we should be going that way, but we did. Any project that looked greener, many projects were green, but the ones that looked greener held on longer in the jury's eyes. A warning: there is often too little detail in regional projects. The regional plans, without codes, they skirt the pod approach of conventional suburban plans. There's just too much pod regional planning, pod-like regional planning. Okay? As in a couple of critiques, we're doing much better showing the context because it was a requirement to show context, to show the larger context, but we must say, it wasn't done with a great deal of spirit. You know, you simply showed a larger Google map. We'd like you to design on the larger Google map. One additional thing, the jury noticed a mastery of graphic technique, especially in the plans and in the layout of the codes. Dare we say that we have recovered the drawing quality of the 1920s. There is an ambiguity, however, in the more urban T-zones. In particular, we noticed that the SketchUp program was becoming both a help, but also a hindrance. Yes, it is very efficient, and perhaps even effective for representing buildings that are not yet designed, okay? But they somehow allow the underdevelopment of the project. We've sketched it up, therefore we're set. SketchUp, a great tool with a great future, is still too generic. We expect those new urbanists who are skillful in computers to make SketchUp, you know, a great tool for urbanism, which it is not yet. We must continue to work on it. We also have to say one thing. Every project, every jury has had an unconscious bias. There was a time when we were being blamed by the world of not doing infill, and so we unconsciously were consciously biased, perhaps unconsciously, against greenfield projects, because simply we had to prove to the world that we did inner city projects. What's happened is there were so many, we have achieved, I would say, so pervasive a presence in grayfield retrofits. We have such a presence in Hope 6 that those of you who submitted grayfield projects and Hope 6 projects, fantastic projects, we think somehow we were unfairly biased against you, because actually there were so many of them. But that's a good thing. It means that we're there with these things. But I want you to know that, I mean, there are certain firms that are spectacular Hope 6 purveyors. Your work is as good as it ever was. There was just too much of it. It became too common. Not your fault. In fact, it's good news. Okay, now on with the projects.
We're going to announce the winners with a couple of comments about each one, and then we'd like the recipients as a group, all the people that were involved in that project, to come to this side of the stage, where juror Karen Parolic will manage the certificates and so on. And then one person from each project should come to the podium and say just a couple of sentences, really, about their experience or someone they'd like to thank. We have only a few minutes per project, so we will ask you to go very quickly with that.
Okay, in terms of thanking, Steve Filmanowicz and Peyton Chung are masters at this. You know, this is a very tiring thing to do, to judge 135 projects. They knew, we only know the 20 or so winners. They knew all 135. They herded us beautifully. They managed the production of this fantastic document, you know, and I think they do deserve an enormous hand of applause.
Let's thank them.
Okay, the first project was, of course, they're by the scale of the charter. In the region, the metropolis, this is the region, the metropolis, the city and the town. The Louisiana Speaks Regional Plan for the state of Louisiana. It's the southern tier of Louisiana, submitted by Calthorpe Associates, John Fregonese also thoroughly involved, and a fantastic set of consultants. I attended some of their meetings. The outreach was unprecedented, and it is the capstone of the many new urbanist projects systematically done in Louisiana under the aegis of the Center for Planning Excellence, which was formed. So the client is the Center for Planning Excellence for the state of Louisiana, Calthorpe and Associates. What they did is the 35 parishes of Louisiana, took about a year to do it, a regional land use plan with a three-part focus: to recover sustainability, to grow smarter, and to think regionally, reflecting the residents' desires to rebuild with minimal sprawl and maximum attention to environmental condition. Okay, another one of Peter Calthrop's typically competent, because it's now commonplace to be very competent, regional plans. He has made it commonplace.
I don't know. This was a particularly profound project for me. It wasn't typical in any sense of the word. The people of Louisiana rose to extraordinary challenges in the midst of probably the most painful moment. And as I said just earlier in the session we just had, I had real misgivings that it was the right time to ask the larger questions. When people had lost their homes and their neighborhoods, their friends and their family, to go in and begin a discussion about the larger economic, ecological, and land use future of the southern part of the state maybe seemed a bit much, a bit too challenging. And the astounding thing was just how easily and readily and profoundly they all rose to what were really complex questions, and engaged that at the same time that they were engaging the most fundamental survival issues. And it was just heartening beyond belief. And also the consensus that resulted, the opportunity to make a real difference there. I think the seeds have been planted, and it's largely because of, Robin Rather here and Rachel. Well, Robin did a lot of the communications and surveys and community participation stuff, and of course Rachel represents the group that was ballsy enough to go out and do this in the middle of this, in the madness, and orchestrate. Actually, this was married to three tiers: Ray Gindros and Andreas. We were all working together, trying to manifest the three levels of new urbanism simultaneously in this hardest of contexts. And I'd say we all succeeded, and it was quite extraordinary. Thank you.
The next two projects show some global reach at this big scale of the region, metropolis, and town. That both of them are supersized university plan projects in faraway places. The first one stands out in pretty powerful contrast to the anti-urban development so rampant in nearby Dubai and places like it. Here's one that's street-oriented, and it stands out in pretty substantial contrast also to the kind of export that many US-based design firms have been doing, delivering conventional sprawl and spectacular but anti-urban high-rise buildings in the Middle East during this period. This project is the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Dubai, Saudi Arabia. It was submitted by HOK. The site involves 3,200 acres of coastal desert along the Red Sea, 50 miles or so north of Jeddah. It's a modern university and academically oriented, sustainable city that helps transform their national economy and higher education system with urbanism. Let's welcome the HOK team.
I must confess to y'all today that I am truly excited and proud to be accepting this award on behalf of HOK. As the largest project in HOK's entire history, we knew from the very beginning that it was going to be something very special. When we started the master planning process in September of 2006, we knew that it was important to us that we wanted to create a place, a community, and a world-class institution that not only respected the natural environment, but also embodied the principles of good urbanism. And I think more importantly to me, the interesting part was trying to continue that vision as we moved throughout the process and we moved towards implementation. We were very blessed to have the Saudi Aramco and the royal family as our clients, and it was truly amazing that they shared our same progressive vision as we moved through the project. Moving forward from today, the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology will actually serve as a benchmark for sustainable design in the kingdom, and we are very proud to be a part of that movement in Saudi Arabia. Although the progressive and aggressive schedule has been a bit of a challenge, especially on a project of this magnitude, we are anxiously awaiting the completion in September of 2009. On behalf of the more than 450 HOK planners, architects, urban designers, landscape architects, and engineers that have worked on this project over the past 2 years, I would like to say thank you very much for this honor.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll do Vedanta, Andres. You want to say anything about HOK? Okay. Well, we all talk about small is beautiful, but we have to be able to think big as well, and you're going to see that in this project. The Vedanta University Master Plan in Orissa, India, is an example of the kind of ambitious and holistic action required in exploding populations. This is intended to unite instead of dividing the academic components and the rest of university life. It was submitted by Air St. Gros, architects and planners, and includes approximately 8,700 acres of undeveloped land between Puri and the state capital. What they have is a master plan of one of India's newest universities, but also the supporting community and how it's expected to grow over the next 15 years in a way that's uniquely sensitive to place, culture, and environment. It doesn't look like North American new urbanism sat down in India, instead incorporates the culture of its place. Let's welcome the Air St. Gros team.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful project to work on, and it's really a donation by one Indian industrialist who found himself with a phenomenal amount of money and decided that he couldn't spend it on cars and apartments and whatever, and has decided to give just about all his money to form a university in India. And the shortage for university seats in India currently is about 500,000 seats, and he said in one of his conversations that I'll take 20% of that, and I'll try to solve that problem. So he has donated $1 billion in a foundation to start this university, very much in the tradition of Stanford, Leland Stanford or Carnegie, and has now committed close to $3.5 billion to complete it. We're really proud that construction, at least the groundwork, has started 3 months ago, and they plan to open the university in 3 years for 12,000 students, and then next phase is 45,000 students, and the next phase is 100,000 students. So it's really great to realize that there are people like that around who are willing to be philanthropic with their money, and this has spawned several other Indian industrialists across the world to come forward and contribute money. And not too long ago, we received another commission to do another university for 30,000 students in India based on, again, a donation by some individuals. So thank you very much, and on behalf of all AS St. Gros partners, we didn't have 450 people. We had about 40 people working on this project. It's really impressive that they could dedicate that many people. We had about 40 people, and really the strength of the firm behind this project. And so thank you very much on behalf of everyone.
Congratulations. Great. The next award goes to a project called A Civic Vision for Central Philadelphia, submitted by WRT, Wallace, Robertson, Todd. And interestingly, the client and design team leader is Penn Praxis, University of Pennsylvania School of Design. It's a fantastic project, enormous in its scope, site approximately 1,153 acres of Philadelphia waterfront, stretching for 7 miles along the Delaware River. A thorough plan to restore historic street connections within a supportive urban framework to revitalize Philadelphia's underappreciated Delaware River waterfront. Having seen, just a comment, having seen work done, in fact, a regional plan for Central Florida, done with extreme competence, again, by the same group, Penn Praxis, University of Pennsylvania, I think they really are the group to watch coming up. If students can do work of this quality, it's really extraordinary. Of course, the students and faculty together, but it was, the idea that students and Wallace, Robertson, Todd can work together gives rise to the idea of an apprenticeship. Apprenticeship as a way of learning both urbanism and architecture. It might be the way to go if these projects are the result.
Thank you. It was a unique experience working with Penn Praxis. Typically when we're working on projects of this scale, we're working with cities. And in Philadelphia, we're in the midst of a reform movement in city government that's focusing back on planning and urban design. So I feel very lucky to be working on this project. And I'd like to thank CNU and the jury on behalf of the citizens of Philadelphia, because the strength of the plan, beyond just the implementation of the principles of the CNU, is the civic engagement that led up to that process. Not only was Penn Praxis part of the team, but Penn's project for civic engagement was key to the development of the citizens-based values and goals that drove the plan. So what's interesting about the work is that out of the grassroots efforts came the same principles that our Congress espouses. So I'd like to thank the jury on behalf of the citizenry of Philadelphia. Thanks.
We move now to the scale of the neighborhood district and corridor. One advice to applicants in next year's and future years' Charter Awards: the slides you submit or the images that are assembled into a slideshow basically for the jury to use are of paramount importance in your application, because the jury has to go very fast through dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of projects. So that basic information sheet and the images end up being a very valuable tool for us to remember what project we're looking at and to see a lot of them very quickly. Well, this next project was the proof through those images that the Hope 6 leadership from CNU is still delivering dividends, and in fact, is still delivering some of the best yet of the genre. This one especially stood out because of a richer blend of building types that we could see in those pictures. It's Oakwood Shores in Chicago, Illinois, and was submitted by Fitzgerald Associates Architects. They're owners and clients from the Chicago Housing Authority, Community Builders, Inc., Granite Development, Ujima, and MB Real Estate Services. It's a 35-acre area, part of a larger neighborhood renewal program on Chicago's south side, and is a Hope 6 funded redevelopment that replaced public housing with a neighborhood, mixed income houses, row houses, and flats, and reestablished this traditional street grid, reconnecting to surrounding neighborhoods. Oakwood Shores.
We'd like to thank the Congress for our award. As you see, there's a lot of stakeholders in these projects. This is one of the number of the CHA's, or Chicago Housing Authority's, Plan for Transformation projects. It's a tremendous undertaking what they're doing. So Oakwood Shores is one of the first developments to come online, and so it's really an honor to receive this award. So of course we thank our clients, Granite Development, MB Real Estate, and Ujima, and the community builders from Boston, and also thank the community group. The Neighborhoods Working Group really shaped what we did. Certainly Chicago's context is in some ways it makes it very easy, but the community groups really influenced what we did, so we can't thank them enough, and they continue to influence what's going on there today, so I'd like to thank you very much.
Congratulations.
We are giving a little bit of short shrift to the great number of organizations and people who are associated with these projects. We tend to emphasize the designer and the client, but it's always a very complex team, quite a lot to read. Just to give you an example, in the next one, I'm going to read the whole list of the kind of people who are involved. This is the Rockville Town Center in Rockville, Maryland, very much a town center of an existing, slightly devastated urban core near Washington, submitted by WDG Architecture, master planning and design guidelines by the city of Rockville that suggests a great deal of integration between the city, the staff of the city, and the designer, master planning and retail development by Federal Realty Investment Trust, one of these fantastic new large organizations that funds new urbanism and by becoming developers, residential development by Ross Development and Investment and the DA-NAC Corporation. These are very complicated projects, and those of us who've done it, you know, it really does take everybody, all the cylinders working at the same time. They all deserve credit. This site, which I have visited, and the reason I asked Victor to allow me to present it is that I've had dinner there. I discovered it one night, I had dinner there, and it was absolutely extraordinary. I believe it may be, if not the best urban space yet made by the new urbanism, it's certainly among the best. It's a really big square. It's as big as anything in Europe. The spatial definition is superb, it is complex, and having dinner there, I felt really in the center of something terribly sophisticated and terribly metropolitan. I forgot where I was, in other words. And that is the power of architecture. It was built on a scraped mall. The project replaces a failed mall with residential, retail mix, and cultural amenities that creates a new pedestrian scale focal point in a downtown dominated by major regional arterials. Just a little anecdote. I know that the project is superb, and I remember at one point randomly meeting the mayor of Rockville, and what he wanted to talk about, it was so strange, he wanted to talk about the width of sidewalks. And he said, Andres, what I really want you to know is, do you think that an 18-foot sidewalk is wide enough? And so obviously, although he does not appear here, there's a great deal of intervention by the mayor of Rockville in having this be as good as it was. It was also done very quickly. I remember meeting that mayor just what seemed a couple of years back, and lo and behold, the project was done 2 years later. And I think that shows how government can also help rather than hinder.
Thank you. I'm humbled by your comments. That's wonderful. I'm Eric Lieben. I'm Director of Design for WDG Architecture. We sort of got on this job a little bit late in the game. We were the facilitators of a pre-existing master plan. I think one of the true challenges was seeing this thing through during a declining condo market in Washington, D.C. We've had some wonderful motivation, especially by Mayor Giambo of Rockville. He was really the glue that sort of kept this whole thing together. He's no longer mayor there, but not a result of this project, I hope. But it really took that force, a politician who just loved architecture. He loved turn of the century Rockville. He was the one who sort of led to the establishment of guidelines. I mean, it was a wonderful broad-based public-private partnership. There was a great deal of input by the citizenry, probably 3 or 4 years before I even got involved. But that sort of love of old cities was, I think, kind of directed this thing and helped it reach its conclusion. Again, I have to thank our clients, RD Rockville and Federal Realty and of course the City of Rockville. So thank you.
Good job.
Thank you. Congratulations. Sorry. By the way, that's a must visit in Washington. Go out to Rockville and check it out. And by the way, it's already expanding. You can see that this new higher density, excellent urbanism it's not just the site of the old mall, it is spreading into the city.
There are a few must-visit places in the country in the new urbanism, and one of them you just saw another is the Cotton District in Starkville, Mississippi, for example. Mixon, which is the one we'll see next, is going to be one of those places that every new urbanist will want to see when it's done. George Holt, one of the designers, is an unsung American hero, and his teammate and client, Vince Graham, got to show here in Mixon what he can do when a municipality of vision allows tight-knit urbanism. The jury thought that this one was the most spatially rewarding plan we saw. It's called Mixon in North Charleston, South Carolina. It was submitted by the Ion Group and planners and architects Keene Places, Tim Keene, Holt Design, and McKellar Places. It's a 44-acre infill site in North Charleston. It's a 20-year plan for a new high-density, low-rise neighborhood. It qualifies for LEED and D and includes churches, schools, parks, and a community center. Mixon. Good job, guys. Thank you.
On behalf of Ion Group and Vince Graham, I'd like to thank the jury for selecting Mixon as a Charter Award winner. We're all very fortunate to work for a socially responsible company like the Ion Group and work for Vince Graham. He continually pushes us to achieve what most developers wouldn't even attempt to try. We're still trying to figure out whether that's good or bad. But we're also, Ion Group is very fortunate to work with some very talented partners such as Keene & Company, Seaman & Whiteside, McKellar and Associates, and George Holt. We're also very fortunate to be able to work in a municipality such as North Charleston. They've truly become a partner with us and have been open-minded, and they just, they don't take no for an answer. When we go to see them, they're just very, very helpful. I guess the last thing I wanted to say was Mixon, the North Charleston area and Mixon continues to struggle. It's a very difficult situation, and it struggles because of the years of sprawl and the divided highway system that cuts right through the city. But we think with the continuing partnership between the city of North Charleston and the Ion Group, we'll be able to bring back a sense of place. So thank you so much for rewarding perseverance. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
By the way, I don't know which images were shown. It's a much larger project than those renderings would show. Those just happen to be delightful little spaces, but it's also it's a big project. It's not just the small. The next one, it's mine. The master plan for the Western Harbour in Edinburgh, Scotland, submitted by Robert Adam Architects. The client and the landowner are Forth Properties Development. The site is a 69 acres post-industrialized portion of a harbour front in Scotland's capital. A rethinking of a pre-existing waterfront where a previous master plan called for single-use pods and high-speed arterials. This plan delivers a compact, vibrant, transit-connected urban fabric accommodating affordable housing and 22 acres of park, plaza, and promenade space. A few notes: Robert Adam is one of the most effective architects and planners in England, very much bridging the ideas of the new urbanism, the Prince of Wales, traditional architecture, and conventional, the Royal Institute of British Architects. He's one of the people that is connecting very, very effectively with essentially a hostile profession in England. And I would say that we should do everything possible to get him back here every year, because we need that kind of person both here and there. And I'd love that this project won. Also, remember that projects, even the bad projects, the prior project, tend to be fairly good in England. So in order to achieve the throwing out of an existing one, it really has to be very, very much better, because the standard is higher. Anyway, Robert Adam.
Well, hello everybody. This is clearly a great honor for me and for everyone who worked on this project. a particular honor because I've been associated with the CNU for so long now that I have a sort of room full of friends. And it's a fantastic pleasure just to be able to say that to all my friends in the audience and all the ones who will hopefully become better friends in the future. And like all friends, I'm slightly critical from time to time, as you know, but that's how good friends are. So it's a fantastic honor. I have to say that I'm going to read out the other participants because it's very important. I don't call myself a master planner in these projects. I call myself the chairman of a master planning team. And they are, of course, my client who's stuck with this through thick and thin, and there's been some pretty thin times. Alan Baxter Associate Highways Engineers are most importance, and Arabs as well. We had engineers, GVA Grimley Planning Consultants, Gray Marshall Associates, Executive Architects, Landscape Design Associates, and Gardner and Theobald, Quantity Surveyors, Cost Consultants. I have to add one to this, actually we also had realtors involved, and this is very important. I'll finish off with that. But I want to make one point. I'd like to offer this as a bridge for the CNU with the CEU, the Council for European Urbanism, a brother organization or a sister organization, depending how you feel about it, because in Europe, we share so much culturally with the United States. I mean, so much, but we also have differences. And I think the existence of the CEU is a precise expression of that very close association and that recognition of difference. And I'm so pleased that this project is recognized by the CEU and we can all understand this. And I want to finish off with every project has one big and important lesson for our movement. And the really important one in this, in my view, is very simple. We took over a big block monocultural master plan, remnants of which are on this site. We had exactly the same ingredients for political reasons, same number of units, same areas, and so on. And we increased the value of this site by £12 million sterling, which is 20 to 24 million dollars, $24 million, depending on the current exchange rate. That's a very important and powerful lesson, because that is the one way to convince people who really don't care too much, but just want to make money, that this is a genuinely successful method of undertaking urban design. And it is the CNU that has pioneered this. I must thank the CNU and repeat my great honor of being here. Thank you.
The next project utterly proves the unique new urbanist notion that you can get better by growing. And it does it in a traditional downtown and Main Street setting in a municipality nearly swallowed up by Atlanta's northward sprawl. This is Woodstock Downtown in Woodstock, Georgia. It was submitted by Tunnell Spangler, Walsh & Associates, and their developer is Hedgewood Properties. What they did was expand the capacity for compact mixed-use development in character with a historic downtown and helped realize the regional vision that will counter the effects of sprawl. Congratulations to Woodstock Downtown. Good job, Don.
It's a great neighborhood to come visit when you come to Atlanta in 2010. Hedgewood Properties and community is a very important component to Atlanta in that they are creating wonderful neighborhoods, not just in Woodstock, but throughout the metro area, and are setting the example for the rest of the planning community as well. They also have an important component in that the Achilles heel of new urbanism for a number of years has been the commercial part of it. And having Sherry Morris, who's the president of the commercial, has really helped energize and help us understand how commercial needs to work in the suburban model. We are in the battleground, in my thinking, in that the suburbs of Atlanta certainly need to grow, but they need to grow in a much more constructive way. The other important component, has already been said by others, is that Richard McLeod, who is the planner, city planner, very seldom you'll get a champion that will just stick with it as long as he did. And Richard McLeod is truly one of the most important components that made this whole project work, in that he kept the political side intact. So we really are appreciative of this, and thank you so much.
That team has people in it who are on their third and fourth new urbanist project. which is both heartening and a little bit frightening. I'm next, right?
Block, street, and building.
The Block, Street, and Building. The next one is one of my personal favorites, and it's because I've visited it. And however good the photographs are, the experience is better. It's a most refined project done by very, very young developers, as you will see. Harvey Sahota and Anna Lauder, under the name of the City Loft Corporation. The architects, magnificent architects. McAlpine Tinkersley Architecture with John Pierce. This is a 2.5-acre infill parcel, formerly home to a storage building and surface parking lots. 2.5 acres that is a universe. There is so much there, and it transitions beautifully from a T5 into a T4 into a T3. You'll see that it has two parts. Now, its contribution is that they are among the simplest buildings that I have ever seen within the New Urbanist canon. Virtually no articulation. The mixed-use portion is a beautiful white brick box with minimal detailing, and the houses, which is the housing part, an innovative muse typology, quite original, hiding the parking, is again as simple as could be. It's all done with proportion. So I applaud the very young developers, and I applaud also the exceptionally skilled architects.
Thank you. We would like to thank the Congress and the jury for this honor. Following on Andreas's words earlier, we would particularly like to thank the jury for honoring this project, which is essentially a very small infill development in a very small city. And if this project can be recognized in this way, we hope it's something that can encourage other developers in basically any city to take what could be seen as a risk and really go for it. This is a very personal project to us. We helped to design it, we developed it, we live here, we work here, and we see every day how projects like this can really improve the lives of those who live and work and visit, and how good urbanism really is an essential factor for people's everyday life. We'd like to thank McAlpin Tinkersley Architecture and the City of Montgomery's Planning Department for encouraging projects like this and really making things happen. So thank you.
Something about the city of Montgomery, Alabama. It has this project. It also has two exceptionally good TNDs in the outskirts. Also, one of them by Harvey and Anna. Exceptionally good. You'll see its emergence. It's already under construction with the first buildings. It also has a plan for the urban core by Dover Cole and a comprehensive and coordinated code, essentially a smart code for both the county and the city. So here you have a city that has been nothing but kicked around by bad planning for 50 years, pulling itself up and having plans and codes of the first order and model projects. It's astounding what can happen and how quickly it can happen.
Continuing at the scale of the Block, Street, and Building, earlier Andres mentioned the endless parade of SketchUp architecture that we saw as jurors. These are the contemporary buildings that are appear to be designed to maximize the chances to use the software with the overlapping volumes and extended planes and so on. And we saw that purported to be contextual in Sweden and in Russia and in Scotland and in New York and in the Midwest and in the Pacific Southwest and Asia, and so you get my point. So this project was a real standout compared to that endless parade. It was about the crafting of a fine thing and receiving history and adapting it and applying it with discipline and awareness. It's called Almeria Row, and it's in Coral Gables, a very difficult place to achieve something of this kind. It was submitted by Maria Talahuardia and Teofilo Victoria and their client, Fernando Manoya. It's a 0.7 acre infill parcel rezoned into 10 lots in the historic garden city of Coral Gables. They basically returned a classic urban housing type very legitimately to the garden suburb, and each house has a coral stone courtyard and which links the main house to a coach house. Almeria Row.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. To be completely frank, we never expected an award of this kind, so we have nothing to say. But we saw early on, though, how the project was in fact as much a building project as it was a project on urbanism. And perhaps what the jury might have seen in the project was, in fact, the very efforts of the Congress in these past several decades. What I mean by this is that Almeria Row is, in fact, a practical application of what we as architects have learned from the lessons of the Congress. It's not a project that promotes or proposes, but rather one that puts into practice lessons learned. The fundamental qualities of the project that Victor referred to, building in an American downtown and the recovery of a old but prevalent American typology, or a typology in the American city, the townhouse, the fee simple townhouse that is, are the lessons that we learn from our readings and, of course, the teachings of many of you. And so for this, we're very grateful. And on behalf of Maria de la Guardia, who's my partner, Elizabeth Pereiro, who's the project manager, and everyone in our office, we do sincerely appreciate this award. And one last thing that I would say, perhaps in commemoration of or to celebrate the 500 years of the birth of the architect Andrea Palladio, this could not have been done without patronage, the patronage of Fernando Menoyo, and Maria Cristina Longo, who have pursued this project relentlessly and without giving in to the many vices out there that haunt us all. Thank you very much.
This is another must-visit project. Seems to be a simple set of townhouses. The elegance is stunning. It does not come through in the photographs, but above all, the simplicity. What you can do with 4 rooms and a couple of closets when the proportions are correct is absolutely mind-boggling. Little marble, of course, and the help of Andrea Palladio. But it really is. It's one of these projects that when you visit, it's terribly exciting. The next one is a pattern book for neighborly houses, submitted by Urban Design Associates. The client, interestingly, was the Habitat for Humanity International, the Institute of Classical Architecture helped funded, and Classical America. Just a wonderful combination of architects dedicated to excellence and normally associated with very, very high-end work, helping or bridging the technical gap between that which they have learned by these very elegant practices and helping the poorest of the poor in America. Just a wonderful, wonderful story. And of course, the site, it says here, is traditional neighborhoods throughout the United States. It's the kind of design guide that helps developers build and improve the quality of affordable housing. Now, this is another one of the great UDA books, of which the first was the pattern book at Celebration. They did the pattern books. They've done many, many of these important ones in Louisiana and Mississippi that have had effects even with the mobile home industry. It's an amazingly important tool, and again, like Peter Calthorpe, who reinvented the master plan, the regional plan, literally, and dusted it off and gave it life. UDA has taken the pattern book, dusted it off, and given it life. And they're miracles. We are a little too accustomed to seeing such good work. I think we should always celebrate when we see one.
Thank you very much. I accept this award on behalf of the Institute for Classical Architecture, Classical America, Habitat for Humanity, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Surdna Foundation, and Urban Design Associates. The Congress of the New Urbanism is one of many organizations, perhaps the central organization, in a constellation of groups concerned with these issues. One of them is the Institute for Classical Architecture, and we're trying to have as much communication as possible. Therefore, both Liz Platter-Zyberk and I are members of the board of directors, as is John Massingale of the Institute for Classical Architecture. And Barry Long, who is the CEO of Urban Design Associates, I've also dragged up on stage to receive this award. This began with a conversation in Washington between Paul Gunther, myself, and the man who was the head of Habitat for Humanity. And he said, we know that 87% of Americans are comfortable with the thought of affordable housing in their neighborhood, if it fits in. And then Tom Jones went on to say, that's our great failing. We need to change the standard of design so that our housing can be acceptable to more and more neighborhoods, so that we can promote more and more mixed income, truly sustainable neighborhoods. And that's how this came about, and we sincerely hope that it's an important step in that direction. So thank you, CNU, for recognizing that effort.
This was submitted by Mouzon Design and published by his New Urban Guild Foundation. The site is all the neighborhoods of the Bahamas. And it's a, quote, graphic architectural code, close quote, for a specific Caribbean locale. It also models a novel approach to getting to the core of what matters in an architectural pattern language. Architecture of the Bahamas.
I'd like to, first of all, thank Orion and Amanda Lindroth and their band of like-minded visionary colleagues in the Bahamas that, not for a particular project, but just for the future of the architecture of the nation, dipped into their pockets and commissioned the book just because it would, of what will happen, we hope, down the road. I'd also like to thank Jana Whitley, who is photographing with me, her sister, who is my wife, Wanda Mazan, who was cataloging the photos, and then both of them for tolerating me in the several months that followed so that I could finish the book. Quickly, one thing about the title of the book, it's not just marketing fluff, it actually means something. It's actually telling the truth in advance for what we believe that it has a chance to do, and that is to restart a new living tradition. You know, today most people say that that's absolutely impossible, but like any good new urbanist who doesn't even get interested in a project until someone tells us it can't be done, we said, no, maybe we actually can. I got the most fascinating email from Orion like a week after the book came out, and then 3 minutes after he hit the send button, before I could even read it, he called me up from the Bahamas and said, Steve, it's really happening. I said, what do you mean? He said, there are builders sitting here flipping through their first copy, and they said, that's why my granddaddy did that. I need to start doing it that way again rather than the way I've been doing it. So we have great hope that this is actually something that can take place, and hopefully it can be a model for ways of doing it everywhere. Thank you.
Steve is an amazing phenomenon. Doesn't seem to sleep. I believe he doesn't, actually. And his production, that book was created in almost no time while doing many, many other things. And by the way, it doesn't show in any of the photographs. The book is an inch thick. Absolutely comprehensive, all over the Bahamas. We want to particularly thank, because I know them well, Jana and and Wanda for organizing him, because if it were not for them, absolutely nothing would be done. And one other person, when you look at the elegance of a lot of the New Urbanist, the CNU production, the catalogs, the schedule that you hold, and the pattern books of UDA, there's a person behind this, a graphic designer called Terry Wolf, who has an extraordinary eye for putting together a great amount of information elegantly. If you look at what goes on in a page of, for example, of one of the pattern books, that could really be what, you know, Paul Moraine calls a dog's breakfast. It can look awful, incoherent. And Terry just pulls it together, and she is largely responsible for the look to the world, the projection, the brand look of the CNU. And I think she also deserves applause at this after 15 years. Where are we?
Marion Square.
Oh, Marion Square in Charleston, South Carolina, Fairfax and Salmons, the architects working with Evans and Schmidt, Goff D'Antonio, Randolph Martz, and Ralph Muldrow, who are architects locally. This is an area for redevelopment surrounding Marion Square Park, a 10-acre square in Charleston. And it is what used to be called, and I think we should begin introducing this name, used to be called a counter project. This is a project that is not commissioned, but either by countering an existing condition, i.e. an existing project, or imagining what it could be, they become catalysts. So this is a catalyst of the kind that was at the very, very origins of the European counter-revolution that Leo Creer was involved with some 30 years ago, which you might see in rational architecture. You know, the architects initiating, taking hold, and doing something that ultimately cannot be forgotten, that it imprints itself on the city so that nothing less good can be built, but that something of that kind actually comes into being. Now, Fairfax and Salmons are the finest of fine architects. They have extraordinary clients. They could spend their days doing the most refined and elegant details for the greatest mansions that are being built now. And it is wonderful to see how they actually join us in the mud every once in a while. Wrestling in the mud, which is what New Urbanists do. I'd love to have them here.
Thank you so much. We're not urbanists, we're architects, and we approach this project strictly through the buildings. And to quote Steve Mouzon, buildings need to be lovable. And what we've tried to do was, because we had a very simple urban project, was to create complex, beautiful, classical buildings that would capture the imagination and the passion of the citizens of Charleston. Two neighborhood groups, the Committee to Save the City and the Mazik Ragborough Garden District in Charleston, begged us to do this project. We had no budget, and so we gathered our wonderful team in the office, Ben Pentreath, whose beautiful watercolors you see, Marianne Cusato, who has come to great honor with her Katrina Cottages and Get Your House Right things, and Meredith Thompson, who decamped to California. But just want to thank everybody for on the jury for recognizing us, and thank you. Bye.
You might note, if you have the details, that one of the more brilliant parts of this project is taking an absolutely, utterly miserable 8-story 1960s office building and turning it into a beautiful palazzo using the structure. This is part of the agenda of retrofit. And you have to do it quickly before it becomes a historical structure, because now everything, regardless of quality, becomes historical. I believe it's the building you see there on the left, before and after, that's being projected now. So even the 50s buildings, or 60s in this case, have a future.
The last two awards emerged from academic settings. Of all the student work we saw, all of the student work that came to us got something powerful on screen. Some big single strong idea was there. We saw one that included post-apocalyptic versions of what might need to be done after peak oil. Another really got the basics of street-oriented and dignified addresses very powerfully right. But the Andrews University project for the North End District in Michigan City, Indiana, had all of the singular things, but they were wound together into one civic art package. Thoroughness was the word of the day. This was submitted by the School of Architecture of Andrews University and their faculty, Troy Hamanchuk and Andrew Von Mar. The site is about 670 acres in downtown Michigan City. It's a city of 33,000 people between Chicago and South Bend. Andres, would you like to add any additional comments about the North End District?
I'd just like to say that all the academic projects, there were I don't know how many were presented, but there were 5 or 6 exceptional ones. And I believe that every year they come in from the University of Maryland, Judson, Andrews, and Notre Dame. In this case, one was not better at the level of design, but at the level of the comprehensive project, as Victor said. But there is something extraordinary happening between these 3 schools of architecture, very close, in very close proximity. Notre Dame and Judson and Andrews, short drives from each other. Something extraordinary is emerging in America. It could be where the best architecture is taught at this moment worldwide.
Thank you very much. We're very humbled for our little school in Michigan to be included in this fine group. I know that there's many schools that participate in shred processes with their students. One of the things that we've been very fortunate to be able to do is to actually always have a patron that actually puts money behind the project, which has made a huge difference. In this case, the mayor of Michigan City, Indiana. And the thing that happens every year is that the students who go through our curriculum that is designed to teach them about these things suddenly learn about the power of design when they're confronted with the real people in the shred process that they're working for, and it changes their lives. And so I encourage all of those who are in the academic environment to seek those kinds of opportunities, because it does change the students' lives in my experience, and it also changes the communities, because we're this non-threatening organization that comes in and puts out these proposals. And it's designed at a level that's not heroic, but simply well-executed, ordinary work. And I think that's what makes the difference. So thanks again.
Congratulations. That's what Liz calls plain old good architecture. So hard to find. The last project is one that was not a submittal, but it was the result of a very exciting trip that the team took. Actually, it was a trip that the team took to see the new School of Architecture at the University of Miami, designed by Leon Creer. And we came back with such a buzz that we decided to give it a special award, unbidden, and in the hopes that it would become a new tradition, that the team, when it meets in a city, might go out and take a candidate building, and if they find it to be good enough, like a building that has not, or a project that has been submitted, that they might give it what would be called a special jurors award. And so this year, and hopefully the beginning of a tradition, is Leo Creer's School of Architecture at the University of Miami. We ready to?
I just want to say thanks in advance to each of you who either already have been or are about to be voluntold to participate in next year's Charter Awards jury.
Okay. And then I want to close with an anecdote that occurred in the first night. You know, Vincent Scully has been with us from the very beginning. In the 60s, he was really the first professor to notice normal architecture, particularly normal American architecture. The professors since Gropius have been, and perhaps even earlier, have been obsessed with Europe. And Scully pioneered a connoisseurship of the normal and the American and the modest, without exaggerating in any way. Well, here he was. We thought he was in Miami, and we invited him to see. What we do in these juries is the first night we see all the projects quickly, every slide of all the projects, 135 of them. And we pulled out some scotch, and we sat down in comfortable chairs, and Scully was present. Vincent Scully attended the preliminary survey for all the award submittals. His comment when he was done was an amazed, quote, "But you are building the world," was his comment. To which I must add and conclude by saying, alas, we are not, but a better and more socially equitable and environmentally responsible world it would be if it comes to be so. So thank you for coming to the awards.